Meals, we have arranged the namaz area in the Kamal Hall. It's nearby this ballroom C. We want to start the next presentation. Our next presenter, who is a very renowned personality of life insurance industry, uh, Mr. Mohammad Ali Ahmed. He will share his thoughts for the preparation and implementation of IFRS 17. Mr. Mohammad Ali Ahmed is the Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Director of EFU Life Assurance Limited. He is an associate of Society of Actuaries with over 20 years of life insurance experience. Mr. Mohammad Ali started his career from State Life Insurance Company. He is currently responsible for the enterprise level strategy at EFU Life and work closely with the CEO and Board of Directors. Please welcome Mr. Mohammad Ali Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and good afternoon. I think as expected, the half of the hall is empty after lunch, but still I think the ones who've decided to stay on, I'll try and make it worthwhile. Okay, so since the morning, we've had a very heavy technical dose of IFRS 17, which was obviously needed as well, because this is what the seminar is about, and the understanding has to be created in terms of what exactly is IFRS 17. I'll talk on the preparation that I think the industry, and when I say the industry, it means not only the insurance industry, but also the regulators, the accountancy body, the actuaries, all of us have to, the IT professionals, but also the management and the board of the companies, all of us obviously have to, at various levels, try and see where we stand. So, I mean, this is just a summary of what you've seen and heard since the morning, that it's probably one of the most significant change to international accounting standards, I think at least over the last 20 years. What it's going to do, which I think all of you now realize also, is that it's going to overhaul the financial statements for the insurance sector, and mainly for long-term contracts, which means life and health companies which write long-term contracts. But I think what's probably more important is that it's going to change the way how insurance business is understood and run. And I think obviously there's a technical side to it, where you need technical experts to actually implement it. But then the company and the management and the board, their understanding and their mindset of the insurance business, that is something which needs to change as well, especially for life companies. We've already talked about, once IFRS 17 is implemented, it's going to bring about consistency across boundaries. So comparative, statements of two companies, maybe in two different jurisdictions, you can still, be able to compare that, compared to the way they are presented right now. And we all know now that it's going to be significantly challenging technically, as well as practical aspects as well. So these are the affected parties. I deliberately use the word affected because they are going to be affected significantly. Of course, the insurance companies, but the senior management and the board. I will spend some time on the senior management and the board and their mindset, because I think we have technical experts who are going to take care of implementing it technically. But unless the management of the companies and the board understand the impact of IFRS 17, I think this is going to create a lot of confusion going forward. So I think that's something which all of us in our capacity need to work on. Shareholders is something I've mentioned. Regulators, I think SSCP, I have a slide on SSCP as well in my presentation. So I think SSCP probably needs to be in the driving seat in terms of, I think Umar Saab mentioned in the morning that probably the working group is going to recommend that the regulators should actually ask us as the industry for a roadmap and an implementation plan of the next 2 to 3 years, because I think it needs to be a focused approach needs to be taken, and I think the industry needs to be probably a panic situation should be created. I think that's my sort of thing. Unless the regulator comes and tells us and gives us a deadline to submit a plan, the industry will take its time to absorb what's really happening. And I believe if if 2018, I think not even the end of 2018, if by middle of 2018, the insurance companies do not know what they need to do on IFRS 17, I think they're already too late. It will take a lot of effort to catch up. So already 2 months of this year have passed. So we have less than 3 years now, actually. And so I think probably SSCP needs to, I have a slide on that, so I'll talk more. FBR, taxation impact, is something which we all need to sort of take into account, and I think the FBR needs to be taken into the conversation at some point in time. Because what we don't want is that the understanding of the profitability and the figure that needs to be taxed, the tax authorities need to really be clear on what is that figure that needs to be taxed under IFRS 17. Accountancy bodies, obviously, the ICAP is fully on board. The Pakistan Society of Actuaries is also fully on board as part of this detailed working group. Perhaps, the smaller players, they also need to reassess. I think all of it is going to come down to having a reassessment of your business model as well at some point in time. So the large established companies, they have a different momentum in terms of how they're going. They have a different size. But the smaller players, I think they probably will need to have that internal conversation as well. That we talked about onerous contracts, and we all know that we do write onerous contracts right now. But then going forward under IFRS 17, do you want to change your business model? Do you want to go into those kind of contracts or not? So I think all of that conversation will probably need to go on. So I think since the morning, the kind of conversation and the presentations that have been had, we know that the actuarial systems is one area which is going to need a lot of work. Companies who do not have, I would say, a detailed and a complex system as of this point in time, they will need to invest both time and money into getting that system on board. The way you structure your data right now, that will need to change so that you're able to account for the various intricacies of IFRS 17. Your internal actuarial risk and finance model will need to obviously be relooked and re-implemented. But I think the last 3 points, the strategic implication in terms of an insurance company and what strategy they have been following for quite some time. Once IFRS 17 comes and the company is able to assess the implications, do they want to continue following that strategy? Maybe this could even result in a strategic shift of the business model of companies. The management implications, the CEO and the C-level executives and the board, they need to understand. Also, within an insurance entity, you have many projects going on, at one point in time. And those projects have their own importance. You could have an operational project going on. You could have an IT project, a new product being launched. So how does a company balance its resources in terms of making sure that the day-to-day routine work and the strategic projects, they continue, but at the same time, the resources that are needed are also put into the IFRS 17 project. So I think the balancing of the resources, and there could be a point where actually there could be internal competition in terms of what resources need to be allocated to what strategy. So I think that also needs to be looked at. I put this as one big risk. Apart from all the other things that we have talked about, the technical implementation and the understanding, I think being part of a senior level within life insurance company, I can very safely say that if the senior executives and the CEO and the board, if they're not taken on board quickly to understand the implications of IFRS 17, it's going to create confusion 1 year down the road. So in the first quarter of 2018 board meeting, perhaps some of you might want to give a small presentation to your board to just let them know that this is something which is coming. This is the impact. As a board member and as a shareholder, this is the potential impact that could come on the organization. Your shareholders will ask you that what is going to be the impact on my dividends or the EPS of the company. So based on the knowledge we have right now and the understanding we have right now, we should have some answers to give to the board. At least the process of bringing them on board needs to start, I think, very, very quickly. Because if that doesn't happen, and if the board and the CEO and the senior level executives think that it's only the actuaries and the accountants who will get together and do something on the side, and it's not really going to impact the overall business, I think that's going to create an issue sooner than later. So I think I've put this as one big risk, that if this conversation doesn't start happening, it's going to impact a lot of organizations. And therefore, planning has to really start. I think February 2018, if you've not had an internal conversation about IFRS 17 within your own organization, you're already too late. I think the more you sort of delay it, the more you're going to have an issue in 2019 and going forward. So these are just some of the points I've put together. And the first point, again, I'm emphasizing on educating the executives on the new requirements and their implications. Internal education, obviously we all understand that the kind of complexity that is there in IFRS 17, which we saw in the morning, we don't expect our board members to understand it the way we presented it in the morning. But a simplified version in terms of addressing their interests. They would want to know that, will the company need to change its strategy moving forward? They would want to know that, and a strategy could mean your product strategy. Will we stop writing certain products, or will we have to modify certain products? Will our IT strategy will need to change? How much budget needs to be allocated to a certain line of business? So I think that sort of initial conversation has to start quickly. Then identifying the key methodology and decisions regarding, let's say, your system design. If you want to go and buy a new actuarial system, you need to start work on that very quickly. All the impact on the financial and the operational system implications needs to be looked at. A budget has to be allocated, because this implementation of IFRS 17 is not going to be inexpensive. It's something which is going to require a certain budget, and I think organizations need to understand that they will need to invest in terms of making sure that they're ready for 2021. And then the next 3 to 4 years, you need to have a roadmap. You really need to know, break it down by quarter to quarter, break it down by month. You need to have defined goals that need to be achieved over the period of time, because if you lose track of this and you don't monitor it, I can 1 year down the road, it's going to be really, really tough. And then the board will ask you that, why didn't we start earlier? And I think that's where the regulator can also come in and maybe just push us in that direction, that we all are forced to give our implementation plan in terms of what we need to do. Yeah, I think I want to spend some time on this, and this is regarding I would say the language that is spoken within the insurance companies. So this is what the sort of conversation happens right now. We talk about premium income, we talk about our growth in premium income, we talk about our market share, which is driven by the top line, we talk about the claim ratios, expenses, investments, assets, profit after tax, solvency. These are the kind of language that is spoken within an insurance entity right now. But we all know, since the morning we've seen that this language will need to change under IFRS 17. But do we expect everyone in the organization to actually start speaking the new language of IFRS 17? No, I think we don't expect that, and we shouldn't even force people to actually start speaking that language. So what's really going to happen is that you will have two kinds of languages being spoken within the entity. So your sales team, they will and they should continue to talk about premium growth, because that is and that is how their whole sort of structure is designed. And we shouldn't and we can't expect the salespeople to actually understand the complexity of IFRS 17. So I think you will have one set of individuals and teams and departments within the organization who will continue to talk about these kind of definitions. But then you will have the board, the CEO, the actuaries, the accountants, at least these sort of four entities who will really need to understand what the impact of IFRS 17 is. So it's okay to have these kind of two conversations, because I think we should not try to confuse, I'm giving an example of the sales team. We should not try to confuse them or even force upon them the terminology and the direction of IFRS 17. That is the job of the management, to make sure that if you had a certain profit objective from a certain line of business, we continue meeting that. And the salespeople, they continue meeting their sales targets. So perhaps I think that clarity in terms of what kind of language to use with what kind of stakeholder, that clarity also needs to be brought on board fairly quickly. Obviously, the KPIs of the company, the key performance indicators of the organization, and what the board might want to see, they will change. Of course, we will tell the board that we have grown by 35% this year in terms of the premium income. But then they would want to know that under IFRS 17, what are the key performance indicators? So I think that's also a key, that a conversation needs to start today, that under IFRS 17, what are the KPIs that we are going to have for the organization? So I think it's fairly clear that the accounting and the actuarial teams will need to work as one team, because these are the two functions which are going to lead the whole IFRS 17 project within the entity. We'll obviously have the IT supporting it, because the IT infrastructure is one where I think a lot of changes will come. The role of the CFO, I think that's something which under the IFRS 17 regime is asking the CFO to think beyond the accountancy aspect as well. So I think that's where this very close coordination of the actuaries and the accountants needs to be sort of demonstrated within the organization, because that's how it's going to move forward now. It's the actuaries who are going to actually give certain very important elements of the financial statements, and therefore I think these two functions really have to move together. So I've just put many points here, but I think the key, I'll just pick a few key points here. Obviously, I think the actuarial departments need to put together a team, people who can really start going deep into IFRS 17 in terms of understanding the implications, but also how to bring all the stakeholders together along with the accountant. So you have the IT team, but then you also have the operations, you have the processes. It's organization-wide impact, so all of that needs to be brought on board. The actuarial system, the models will need to be updated quite significantly. Data structure will need to change so that you're able to actually calibrate and you're able to apply the assumptions fairly easily as compared to how you do it right now. The whole product strategy, the product pricing strategy will need to be revisited. As I said in the beginning, that once you start grouping your products into the various categories required under IFRS 17, you might end up deciding to discontinue certain range of products, because the board might ask you that why are we continue writing onerous contracts, as one example. So I think obviously the actuaries have to play that significant role in terms of creating that infrastructure. The finance and the accounting function obviously has to work hand in hand, and that is where communication with the board, the KPIs, all of those need to be put in place. Along with the accounting, the charter of accounts will need to be changed, and also in terms of how certain reporting is done to the senior level and to the board level. Internal governance, that I think has a direct impact. IFRS 17 has a direct impact on various aspects of the internal governance. So I think I've put together quite a few points, and all of you will get the presentation, so you can have a look at it. But the key message here is that the readiness and the preparation that needs to happen has to happen fairly quickly. IT will obviously have a significant role here, right from modifying existing IT systems to maybe going ahead and buying new IT systems. On the actuarial side, there are various tools and softwares available, looking at buying those as well. The structure of the data needs to be looked at. The way we group certain business together, that needs to be reclassified as required under IFRS 17. Tax is one area where I think as an industry we need to really think through this one. We already know the attitude of FBR and how they perceive the life insurance industry. So I think under IFRS 17, we don't want further confusion. So I think this is something which we need to really assess together as an industry, and at the appropriate point, bring FBR into the loop as well. So I put this slide with a positive intent. The key being that the idea here is that as an industry, I can say that if the